Our interview this afternoon is with Russell Bob Barton. Bob was born in Seattle, Washington in May of 1947. Uh, he served in the United States Army and the United States Navy. Total time was from 1964 until 1986. His highest rank attained was E7, Sergeant First Class. Uh, this interview is conducted at Burleson, Texas on Thursday, September the 12th, 2013. My name is Dale Dexheimer. I'm not related to Bob in any way. Also in the room is Milton Gibson, who is our videographer. This interview is conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress and also for Operation Remember in Burleson, Texas. And with that little introduction, Bob, you can tell us about 22 years.
Okay. Well, let's see. I originally joined the Army in 1964. I was 17 years old. My I moved to Arizona in 1962. My mother died in 1963, and since my mother and father were separated, I was able to convince my father to go ahead and sign the papers to allow me to go into service that young. I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana for basic training, and then from Fort Polk I went to Fort Leonard, Missouri for advanced individual training as a heavy equipment operator. Back in that day, I believe it was a 621 MOS. It later got converted to be a 62 Echo MOS. Learned how to run, or shouldn't say learned, I was familiarized with bulldozers, graders, scrapers, uh, basic operational procedures for them and how to make the attachments move. From Fort Leonard Wood, I was assigned to Fort Lee, Virginia. Was there for a few months, I think, and then came down on orders and I got transferred to Fort Knox, Kentucky, to the 538th Engineer Battalion, which was a construction battalion. They were deploying from there, moving the whole battalion to Thailand. Wound up for an extended period on a troop transport from Oakland, California to get to Thailand. And wound up working on we were building some roads between our unit and the 802nd Engineer Battalion, which was already in Thailand, to create a bypass for traffic, major artery type deal. At some point in my tour of duty in Thailand, I wound up going to Vietnam for 6 months on a TDY project. Wasn't actually assigned to Vietnam itself. I stayed assigned to my unit in Thailand. Then we went back to Thailand and went back to the States. I've forgotten where I was going to be assigned, but I put in for a request to go back to Thailand again because I didn't want where I was going in the States. I didn't want to go. Wound up getting it. I went back to Thailand, stayed there till May of 1967 when I came back to the States and got out of the Army the first time. And was out for a while, couldn't get a good job, and probably rather dumb, but remember watching the movie The Fighting Seabees with John Wayne, and I thought, well, maybe I want to become a Seabee. So I joined the United States Navy. Since I was already trained as a heavy equipment operator, they had no problem letting me join the Seabees as an equipment operator. I went to Gulfport, Mississippi, Mobile Construction Battalion 74, deployed from Gulfport to the Republic of Vietnam with the Seabees. Wound up, our home port or home station was supposed to be Chu Lai, but wound up most of my time being up above Da Nang. I worked up in LZ English, LZ Stud, which later became Forward Fire Base Vanderboove. Was up in Quezon. Did various primary, just straight road constructions up there. The whole battalion came back to the States, went back to Gulfport, and didn't have enough time to do another deployment to Vietnam unless I re-enlisted, and or I could, as a re-enlistment option, I believe I had a station going to Greenland, which didn't particularly set with me, so I decided, no, I'll go ahead and get out. So I only spent like 18 months in the, well, it was under 2 years in the Navy. Got out, again, couldn't get a job. So I decided, oh, well, I'll go back in the Army. Went back in the Army, went to Fort Lewis, Washington. Basically, that's where they processed me so I could get my uniforms and all. And then from Fort Lewis, I went back to Vietnam. Got to Cam Bay, reported into the transit reassignment, and they said, well, we're going to send you to Pleiku, to the 538th Engineer Battalion, or Engineer Company, land clearing. So went to the 538th, and well, after my year with them, I extended for an extra 6 months, and I wound up spending 18 months with them. Our primary mission was clearing the jungle. We cleared the jungle along the highways to prevent ambush sites and allow a greater field of fire for the convoys if they did get ambushed. We cleared land around fire bases, cleared the jungle around fire bases. Same purpose, to keep the enemy from being able to get closer and to give a greater fields of fire to the occupants of the fire base. Ran D7 dozer for a while, and wound up being pulled off the D7 dozer and put on a 548, which is a tracked ammo carrier. We didn't use them as ammo carriers. We used them for our own security and for carrying our gear and things like that. Was on there for a while. I think I got promoted to E5, and then at some point they were short on NCOs, so they took me off the 548 and says, okay, you're going to be a acting sergeant. Since I was a Spec 5, wasn't a promotion, they just gave me stripes instead of the specialist, and wound up walking the ground and making sure the guys were doing what they were supposed to be doing, which was cutting the trees and moving the brush and getting them to into the windrows. Got done with my tour in Vietnam and came back to the States. Was assigned, or I re-enlisted in Vietnam to come back to the States. Station of choice My station of choice was Fort Huachuca, Arizona. Was there for a little over a year. And during my time at Fort Huachuca, I wound up meeting my wife and getting married in January 1972. And then in 1973, came down on orders for Germany. Went over to Germany. Spent 3 years in Germany. Came back to the States. Was assigned to Fort Devens, Massachusetts. Engineer unit in Fort Devens. Well, originally it was a combat engineer unit I was assigned to in Fort Devens. Wasn't real happy about being there because I was an equipment operator, or used to construction equipment. Got promoted to E6. Went to the light equipment company that was up there, 642nd Engineer Company, light equipment. Since they had a position for my MOS and the combat engineers didn't. And was up in Fort Devens for close to 3 years. Got orders, went to Fort Belvoir, Virginia. Went to the United States Army Engineer School there. I was a subject matter expert, training developer for the engineer school. Was there for 39 months, something like that. Wound up on coming down on orders to go to Korea. Went to Korea, came back, went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and had over my 20 in at that time. Didn't particularly care for the unit I was in at Fort Bragg, well, not the unit, but the what we were attached to, and explained to them that, well, I had my 20 plus years in, I didn't need to do this anymore, and went ahead and got out.
That's your story.
That's my story.
22 years compressed into 15 minutes.
Pretty good.
You bet. Age 17, you went in the Army.
Yep.
Went off to Fort Polk. We have heard lots of stories about Fort Polk. Did you enjoy it as much as everybody else did? The skeeters
And sand fleas, yeah.
Was that all a new experience, I guess, to you, Bob?
Yep, pretty much.
Between the Pacific Northwest and Arizona, you hadn't experienced?
I hadn't been down south.
Okay. Basic was a new experience, living in a barracks with a whole bunch of guys.
Yep. It wasn't bad, it was just different.
What time did they get you up in the morning?
5, something like that.
You do a little marching during the day?
Oh yes, went through all the basic training stuff. You did marching, you hand-to-hand combat, weapons training, bayonet training, gas training.
Still do the manual of arms, you think?
We did. I don't know what they do now.
Every once in a while I try to go through it and I don't quite remember all of it anymore, so. You went to lots of places pretty quickly. You went up to Leonard Wood, Fort Lee, Fort Knox, and then you went to Thailand, building roads primarily in Thailand.
Yes.
You came back to the States, but really you wanted to stay in Thailand. What drew you to Thailand? What did you like about it?
Just, I wasn't married, and the work we were doing was interesting. It wasn't sitting around a post doing training for doing training's sake, or in case you would need it at some future date with no real mission involved. And at least there we were doing work. We had a mission, we had a job to do, and enjoyed it.
You built roads primarily.
Yes.
Were you primarily a dozer operator during that time, or?
I ran dozer for a while, ran dump truck for a while, worked with 210 air compressor, worked as a mechanic for a little bit.
After you got out, after your 22 years, you spent all this time in an engineering unit and in the Seabees. What'd you do when you got out?
Became a deputy sheriff for Pinal County Sheriff's Office in Arizona.
I'm sorry, which county?
Pinal County.
Okay, that's not the one with the famous sheriff.
No,
is
that's
it?
not. That's the one that's a little bit south of his.
Okay, okay. How many years you spend in law enforcement?
19 years.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Until I was, I developed what's called retina pigmentosa, which is a deterioration of the peripheral vision of my eyesight. And it got to a point in 2009 that the doctor I was seeing said I really shouldn't, I wasn't legal to drive anymore, and I really shouldn't be carrying a gun. So I sort of had to.
Boy, to say in Arizona you shouldn't carry a gun, that's a pretty brave statement, isn't it?
I
I thought everybody in Arizona carried a gun.
Sort of had to retire.
The retinal condition, service related?
There's no documentation to, there has never been any studies to prove that retina pigmentosa is related to Agent Orange, though I had a couple VA doctors nonchalantly remark when they found out I'd been exposed to Agent Orange that, yeah, well, maybe the two are related. I have AL amyloidosis from Agent Orange, and yeah, it could possibly be related.
On the Agent Orange, there's a certain time frame that if you were in country, you're eligible for benefits. In the time that you were there, is there a time you can remember that you were actually sprayed?
Yes.
The C-130 or whatever it was came over?
Yes. Well, you see, during the Vietnam War, part of the process was that they were using chemical defoliants on the jungle, and our job was clearing the jungle. And yeah, there's incidents where we were knocking down trees at the top. Some sort of mist come down upon us, and so yeah, I probably was definitely exposed to Agent Orange when I was in the Seabees. The areas around a lot of the bases and all where we worked had been cleared out using the defoliant.
So you went back to Thailand basically because you enjoyed the work. Did you get to go back to the same unit?
Yes, I went.
So you knew the personnel, and it was an easy. Well, it wasn't a transition. You just went back
Yeah,
home.
it was just like I'd been
Yeah.
back in the States on
Okay.
leave and then went back.
You take some time off, R&R, go down to Bangkok or anything?
Nah, not from there. Not. I took R&R from Vietnam and went to Bangkok.
Did you enjoy Bangkok?
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
It was certainly a break from what you'd been doing.
Yes.
Okay. You went back to Thailand until May of '67, got out,
That's correct.
trouble finding a good job, the kind of job you wanted, so you went down to the friendly old Navy recruiter and tried to Seabees.
That's correct.
Gulfport to Vietnam. You go on a ship, or did they fly you
We
over?
flew. We C1
You're-
C-141s.
Okay, your equipment was already over there. The Navy, the Seabees, they just took personnel.
Yes. Yeah, the battalions rotated. One battalion would come in and one battalion would leave with the incoming battalion to take over the equipment from the outgoing battalion.
Were the Army units that you served with, were they basically the same as the Seabees? Did you have about the same equipment? You have the same mission?
We had the same equipment. With the 538th Land Clearing Company had a mission that's not related to either the normal Army engineers or the Seabees. Our job was very unique.
But the D7 that you had, Caterpillar that you had in the Army, was the same equipment that you had in the Navy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the basic equipment was the same.
So you could hop on one that was olive drab or that dull old gray color, and it was about the same machine.
Yes. Except
Okay.
ours were right. Except the ones in the Seabees when I was there were all olive drab.
Okay.
Instead of a white star, they had a yellow Seabee or blue Seabee emblem on them.
You spend much time in Gulfport? How long were you in Gulfport before they shipped you out?
That I don't remember. Maybe 4 months, 3 months, something like that.
And that was probably basically orientation for you to go from modern Army green to Navy whatever.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Navy was a short-term thing, 18 months. Went to Fort Lewis and then to Cambron Bay. Your 538th, your land clearing. Initially, you were an equipment operator.
That's correct.
Pushed over trees.
Correct.
Tell us about your day. You stayed at a base camp. Is that a good
No. What we did is we made our own camps. We'd have an area to cut. Let's say, for an example, a 6-mile area on both sides of the road. So we'd go out about 3 miles, and then we'd build a NDP, or night defensive position, and that's where we stayed. And then you get up in the morning, and depending on which way you were going, you'd work out your 3 miles, clear it, come back into the NDP, go out the next morning 3 miles in the opposite direction, clear it, go back into the NDP, then you do the same thing on the opposite side of the road.
So you might be in an NDP for 4 nights, 5 nights?
Yeah. Well, 4 or 5 nights, then you'd move again. We were out for anywhere from 3 to 4 months at a time.
So you built a number of NDPs?
Yes.
Night defensive positions?
Yes. It was just dirt pushed up into a.
And then you had
Ring.
tents, I guess? You slept in a tent?
Sometimes we had tents, sometimes we slept on dozers, sometimes we slept in shelters that we built, depending on what the situation was.
Did you sandbag these things?
Not really, because they were,
You felt pretty secure.
yeah, we supposedly had security whenever we were set up. Sometimes it was questionable,
Okay.
but because we did not always have U.S. Army as our security. We had Vietnamese Vietnamese Army. We had the Rough Puff or regional forces that would provide us security, and there was a certain amount of question as to their loyalties and whether or not they were, which side they were actually would side with in case of a
So
fight.
you slept with one eye open.
Yeah.
Mess facilities in this NDP. Do you have your own? I guess you had your own mess.
We had a 2.5-ton truck that was converted to house the mess facilities that housed the cooks and all. And they'd prepare the meal. You'd pick up, well, this was usually the only time we had hot meal was at night. You'd pick up your meal and then you go eat someplace. You'd either go back to your tent, back to your hooch, dozer, or wherever, and sit down and eat.
What'd you do for breakfast? I'm assuming that this wasn't scrambled eggs and bacon if you said the evening meal was normally the hot meal.
Yeah. I honestly don't remember on breakfasts. I know sometimes we'd have a hot breakfast.
And then you got a deuce and a half, I guess, and went out, or did you bring the
No.
machines back into the
We brought the
NDP?
We brought the machines back
Okay.
at night. You wouldn't leave. As long as the machine was as long as you were capable of recovering the machine, it was recovered to the NDP. If you couldn't recover the machine, then it stayed in the field, but you supplied security to stay with that machine.
Okay.
It wasn't that you could just park them alongside of the road, walk off and forget them for the night, because when you went back the next morning, the thing might blow up in your face.
Breakfast, dinner, lunch. Did they give you a little
Sea rats.
sack?
Sea rats.
Sea ration? Okay.
Yep.
So you had a little box and little can that
Oh,
you
yeah.
took along with you.
Take your cans, stuff them in a sock, and
Was there really a lunch break, or were you kind of on your own operating the
no,
machine?
they'd usually shut down for lunch.
Okay. You're 3 to 4 months in the field, and you've built a number of these NDPs. How often do you get to take a shower?
Oh, we had a great big water tanker, a semi-trailer that was equipped that could be used as a shower. So you could basically take a shower every night. In fact, you'd have to, because you'd get covered with dust and foliage and whatever you'd been cutting in. After you came back in, you had to get it washed off you.
I know you have some experience with snakes. Did you personally have any snake experience?
Any snakes? Not personally. I've seen a few. Had some personal experiences with angry bees and angry ants. Because
Okay.
you'd wind up hitting a tree and getting the bee's nest to come down on your hot hood. And where's there no place to go, them bees are looking for some way to get out. And the same way with the ants. They'd come down, they'll wind up on your hood, wind up wanting to come back in the operator's compartment with you, biting whatever they could while they were in the process of doing that.
And in that case, you bail out of the machine, or do you just...
Yeah, you can't, it's kind of hard to bail out of a machine, because you kind of like got to stop it, put the blade down or whatever to make sure it's not going anyplace. And then there was a short metal from where the cab's attached that you would have to get over to get on the track to get out. So
You didn't have a can of Raid or anything to spray these things?
no,
So if they got in the cab with you, you were just kind of swatting as best
yeah. Yeah, you were trying to get out, but you were getting bit and swatting at the same time.
Okay. Sounds like a fun experience, huh?
Yeah.
Uh, you went from the D7 to a 548 ammo carrier.
That's correct. It's as a track vehicle.
Transition from being a machine operator and running this tracked ammo carrier. You come up and, boy, we need a non-com. We need somebody to give these guys some direction. Were there any hang-ups? Was that a tough transition for you?
No, not really.
You had respect of all the guys that you were supposed to.
Never had any problems with anybody.
Okay.
So I would say I did. I wouldn't, or if, for whatever reasons, if they didn't respect me, they never verbally let me know about it.
Okay. After you finished your tour, you came back to Arizona, married in '72.
Yep.
Somebody you met in Arizona, I guess?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, actually, I originally met her after I extended with the 538. I came back. I had a 30-day leave. I came back, and she was working in the coffee shop my step-parents were running, foster parents were running at that time. And that's how I met her.
That uniform with all those stripes and chevrons just really attracted her, huh?
I don't know. There's an old story going around that was documented by her family members that allegedly at some point she came home, and I think it was when I was there on leave, and kind of like told her father, well, he's kind of creepy.
Whoops.
And then she wound up, well, the only reason she married me is because her dad liked me.
Okay. I guess that's a good reason. You went back to Germany for 3 years to get to take the family, or your wife?
Yes.
Was there more family by then, or?
At that time, she was pregnant. Our first son was born in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Born in a military hospital in Germany.
They live on base?
Originally, we lived on the economy, and then got base housing, got temporary quarters, which was the housing in Germany was apartment buildings that were 3 floors high, and then the attics had been at some time made into quarters. One side was like 8 bedrooms. The other one was, the smaller ones were like 4. And we had a 4-bedroom temp, and then moved from it and got assigned to permanent quarters, which was a 3-bedroom, 3rd floor.
You think the family enjoyed the overseas time?
I don't know. You'd have to ask her.
Okay. I think normally men have a job to do, an assigned task, etc., and it's one thing for men, and I think it's an entirely different thing for families.
Yes, it is, and particularly an engineer unit in Germany, you're TDY, or temporary detached duty, all over the place. I know she had some problems. Our unit, our company commander, for whatever reason, and I know what he told the wives that complained, used to like to schedule our field training exercises for right around Christmas time. And a few of the wives went in and talked to him about that, and they were told, well, he didn't want to go shopping with he didn't want to go Christmas shopping with his wife. So my wife and a few other ladies went to the chaplain and kind of got that corrected.
You came back to Fort Devens, and you were in a combat engineering outfit.
Correct.
combat engineering as differentiated? It's different than
Construction,
other
yes.
units. Yes. What's the difference there, Bob?
Combat engineers, well, at that time, the military has changed in the past 20 some years since I've gotten out, but at that time, combat engineers were in direct support of, say, an infantry or an armored unit. And they would, the ones that would go out, clear the enemy obstacles out so the armor could get through, or they would build obstacles to prevent the enemy armor from coming in. And the construction side, you built roadways, airfields, bases.
Okay. You went from Devens down to Belvoir. You were a subject, you were training, you were a subject
I
specialist.
was a subject matter expert
Subject matter expert.
and training developer.
Okay. What was
Ba-
your subject matter that you were this expert?
Basically anything that involved equipment. I wound up going, or while I was stationed there, I went to the U.S. Navy's water drilling school out in California to observe their training procedures, because at that time the Army had thought that it wanted to get into the well drilling business because of future possible conflicts in the Middle East.
Okay.
And we developed the, well, anybody that was in the military in the 70s know what a soldier's manual is. And that's what we were developing and working on, was soldier's manuals.
And that is,
Basically, take a task, like let's say, perform maintenance checks on a D-70's engine. What does that constitute? Well, you got to check the radiator, make sure that there's adequate water, that the water is up to level. You got to check the oil to make sure that the oil level's up to the level, your hydraulics, so on and so forth. And then we were working, making them into steps, and sort of like making a checkbox
okay.
that, yeah, they did that and that.
Your training, you were training enlisted people.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, obviously at 22 years, the question about would you do it again, you probably would. If you spent 22 years, you must have enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't.
Would recommend it to young people today?
Yes, I would.
Good.
It's a lot of it. It depends on the mindset of the individual. It depends on the individual's personality, if they're going to be able to do it or not. And that's true whether it was World War II or what we
Today.
have today. Is some people like it, some people can do it, and others don't particularly care for it, and they decide to get out, and that's probably the best bet for them.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time in the military. Thank you for giving us time today.
Thank you. Thank you for your time in the
You
military.
bet.